Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Rivals of Ixalan spoilers. So with only 1 week of spoilers for Rivals, we have about 1 million cards to talk about today. Each day of spoiler season just has so much crazy stuff going on, which means we gotta jump right into it. And today, we're gonna kick things off with our exclusive MTG Goldfish spoiler, Induced Amnesia. So before I talk about the card, make sure to check out the article on the Goldfish site. Follow the link in the description. There's deck lists, a full breakdown of the card. So check that out if you're interested in even more information on Induced Amnesia. Anyway, let's talk about this crazy 3-mana enchantment. So Induced Amnesia comes into play, exiles all the cards from a player's hand, and lets that player draw that many cards. And then, if Induced Amnesia goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, all the exiled cards get returned to their owner's hand. So in some sense, this is kind of like a one-person windfall or a Tolarian wins, with one big difference, and that is you can't really use it to fuel graveyard synergies because the cards go to exile, so it doesn't really work with like God Pharaoh's Gift or something like that, reanimation effects. The nice thing about Induced Amnesia, though, is the windfall slash Tolarian wins effect is just the first level of the card, because if you can kill your own Induced Amnesia, it's not just looting through your hand, it's actually generating a ton of card advantage because you get back all those exiled cards. The good news is, in both Standard and Modern, there are plenty of options for killing Induced Amnesia. In Standard, the best one is probably Hour of Revelation. You just play Induced Amnesia, cycle through your deck, eventually you blow up everything with Hour of Revelation, including the Induced Amnesia, draw a ton of cards when you get all the exiled cards back. In Modern, there's potential for some crazy prowess type deck where Cracked Earth makes your opponent sacrifice like a land or a Tarmogoyf while you draw a ton of cards, stacking Induced Amnesia, Perilous Research for even more card draw, so there's tons of cool things there as well. Speaking of Modern, there's also some really cool synergies for Induced Amnesia. I don't know if these are competitive, like tournament worthy, but if you're looking for fun, janky brew around ideas, Induced Amnesia, really sweet with the Processor Eldrazi. You make your opponent exile their hand, then there's tons of cards for you to process away, and then if Induced Amnesia ever dies, the cards won't be in the exile zone for your opponent to get back anyway, so it kind of gets rid of that downside. We also have Miss Griffin, Eternal Scourge, which have a ton of card draw potential. So if you're exiling these to Induced Amnesia, it's kind of like you're drawing an extra card because you can just cast them from the exile zone. But my favorite way of abusing Induced Amnesia is definitely Spirit of Labyrinth. So Spirit of Labyrinth makes it so each player can only draw one card each turn. So if you play Spirit on turn 2 and then Induced Amnesia on turn 3, you just mind twist away your opponent's entire hand because their hand gets exiled, but they can't draw cards to make up for it, which seems super powerful. Plus, you could use Zur the Enchanter to tutor up both pieces. Greater Oromancy protects both pieces. So there's a lot of janky build-around potential for Induced Amnesia. So while I'm not sure this will break any tournament decks or anything like that, it's a really fun, really flavorful addition to Rivals of Ixalan. So big thanks to Wizards for letting us show it off. Next on our list, we got another Planeswalker to talk about. A new Huatli Radiant Champion, and I really like this one. So 4 mana, you get 3 loyalty. However, you could gain loyalty super quick. The +1 puts a loyalty counter on Huatli for each creature you control. -1 gives a creature +X, where X is the number of creatures you control. And then -8 gives you an emblem where whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. Insane amounts of card advantage. So when I first looked at this card, I was like, I don't know. It doesn't really do anything on its own. You need a big board to make it work. However, there is good news. And the good news is we have a perfect deck in Standard to make this work. I think Huatli version 2, Radiant Champion, is certainly better than the original Huatli. So I'm more excited for this one. It's a little cheaper, and in the right deck, it can be really powerful. So number one, what Huatli needs is a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. So you could use Angel of Invention, you can use Servo Exhibition, anything that puts lots of creatures on the battlefield is good. However, the single best home for Huatli is Anointed Procession Hidden Stockpile decks. Those decks get so many random useless creatures on the battlefield, and they're already splashing into green to go with white for Vraska, which means Huatli should be able to come down in an Anointed Procession Hidden Stockpile deck plus 1 time and have enough loyalty to ultimate. And then, after you ultimate, it is an absurd source of card advantage, because notice, it doesn't say when you cast a creature, or a non-token creature. Whenever you get a hidden stockpile token, or embalm a random creature, you're drawing cards. If you're having Anointed Procession out, you're drawing 2 cards, or 4 cards, so you just draw through your entire deck in like a turn, and then it should be second nature to be able to win the game. The other possibility is to use Huatli more aggressively. So if you're playing a token style deck, you can use something like Temet to make a token unblockable, maybe a flying threat like Angel of Sanctions, and then Huatli's -1 gets legitimately scary. One of the things about the token deck is they're really good at making a ton of 1/1s, but they're not necessarily that good at closing out the game. If you use Huatli's -1 on an unblockable or otherwise evasive creature, then you can just close out the game super quickly. So all around, I think Huatli, while limited in where she fits, and potentially win more because she doesn't really do anything unless you have a bunch of other stuff going on. You need to have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, or Huatli doesn't do really anything at all. I think that in the right build, like an Abzan token style build, Huatli can potentially be just a game-winning play and super powerful. Next up, we got another mythic. Elenda the Dusk Rose, our vampire mythic. So 4 mana you get a 1/1. Doesn't sound exciting at first glance. However, it has lifelink. Whenever another creature dies, either yours or your opponent, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. And then when Elenda dies, you get a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink for Elenda's power. So if you get up to 4 power, you get 4 1/1 lifelink vampires. 10 power, 10 1/1 lifelink vampires. So if you think about this card, the first thing you think of is Vampire Tribal, and it's probably possible you can play Elenda in Vampire Tribal. You do have ways to make lots of useless creatures. Maverick Fiend makes tokens, Legion's Landing make tokens. So if those tokens die, Elenda will get big. The problem is, as a 1/1 for 4, Elenda doesn't do much unless you really build around her ability. So I think where you want to be with Elenda is some sort of aristocrat-style self-sacrifice deck. I think that's where the true power of Elenda lies. So if you can make a bunch of tokens or get useless creatures on the battlefield, play Elenda, sack all of them for value, and then sack Elenda, and you basically get a 1/1 for each creature you sacrifice. It's like a combo piece that doubles up your aristocrat self-sacrifice triggers. So that's where I see Elenda the Dusk Rose fitting. I really hope, more than anything, that we get like a Blood Artist or a Zulaport Cutthroat. We got all the pieces for Vampire Aristocrats, so if we can get some payoffs, even a Nantucket Husk, I think that Elenda the Dusk Rose could show up in a somewhat vampire-ish deck that's mostly an aristocrat style deck. So that's my hope, is that we get the right pieces to have vampire aristocrats, because in that shell, Elenda seems like it can be an insane combo piece and super powerful. Next on our list, we have Zetalpa Primal Dawn, which is a really big, very heavily keyworded dinosaur. So for 8 mana you get a 4/8, but it has flying, it has double strike, it has vigilance, it has trample, it is indestructible. So basically any creature-y keyword you could ever want. So I think this could be an interesting finisher in limited. In standard though, there's a big problem. So right now in standard, the Scarab God, Hazaret, indestructible, hard to deal with threats are some of the threats that people are trying hardest to answer, which means cast outs everywhere. Ixalan's Binding is everywhere, and Zapolta loses to those cards just the same as Hazaret, just the same as the Scarab God. So I'm thinking that perhaps Zapolta is going to be limited only, super sweet for white dinosaur commander decks. It is a legend after all. So I think it's powerful and fun, but I don't really know if it'll make an impact on our current standard format, because people are already playing answers to Zapolta to answer other powerful threats in the format. Next up, we have a rare in Kumena's Awakening. So this is a 4 mana enchantment. It has Ascend, and it's basically like a pseudo Howling Mind. It is a literal Howling Mind. Unless you have Ascend, then it becomes a personal Howling Mind where you're the only one drawing cards. So the nice thing about this card is if you build around it in a slow, controlling style deck, you're naturally going to hit your land drop. So in the beginning, your opponent's going to be drawing a card, you're going to be drawing a card, but then that symmetry will naturally break itself. Once you get up to 10 lands, Kumena's Awakening itself counts as a permanent towards your Ascend cost, and once you get to that point, just drawing an extra card every turn is amazing. The main reason I'm excited about this card is Turbo Fog was one of my favorite decks in our last standard format, but we lost Fevered Visions, and Fevered Visions was one of the key cards in that deck. And while Kumena's Awakening is not an exact replacement for Fevered Visions because it doesn't give us the damage to actually kill our opponent, we'll have to have another finisher, maybe Approach of the Second Sons or something. It does make Turbo Fog an actual possibility again because we're able to have that card advantage to keep drawing our fogs every turn again and again and again. So I'm really excited for Kumena's Awakening just because it enables one of my favorite budget decks potentially for Rivals of Ixalan Standard, and we haven't been able to play a Sense Rotation when Fevered Visions left. We also got a bunch of kind of interesting but not super exciting rares. So Seafloor Oracle, little bit expensive, can definitely be a huge source of card advantage in a Merfolk deck, but as a 2-3 for 4, not super excited about it. I see this more as like a limited payoff for drafting Merfolk than a standard playable. Could show up as a one-of, but it dies to Harness Lightning, dies to Lightning Strike, dies to Fatal Push with Revolt, so a lot of removal gets it, so I'm not sure it'll be consistent enough to be standard playable, but the amount of card draw it can generate is really scary if it sticks on the battlefield. We also got Jade Light Ranger, which is 2 explorers on a creature. Basically, you explore twice when it enters the battlefield, which means if you have some sort of additional payoff for exploring, it could be good. Super sweet with Panharmonicon, where you get 4 explorers, I believe, which that's a lot of explorers. But basically, best case, you get a 4-3 for 3. Worst case, you draw a couple lands, which isn't bad either. But neither of those things is super efficient. So I'm not sure where Jade Light Ranger fits. Maybe it's better than I'm giving it credit for. Definitely interested in it with Panharmonicon, but I'm not sure if it's good enough just as a standalone threat in the 3-drop slot. Finally, Paladin of Atonement is kind of unique. It's a Vampire Knight, and it's a weird sort of life loss payoff. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. Then when it dies, you get to gain life equal to its toughness. So you get those counters, you gain back a bunch of life. So I guess this is some sort of weird burn hate card or something. The problem is, as a 1/1 for 1, it's pretty small, and the growing is pretty minimal. Maybe if we had like Pain Lands in the format or some other payoff to naturally grow this without taking huge chunks of damage from the opponent, it could be better. So I don't know. It's an interesting card, but I'm not exactly sure where it fits in the format. The good news about today is we got some insanely exciting uncommons. This is one of the most exciting uncommon spoiler days we've had in a long time. So number 1, we got Legion's Lieutenant, a 2-mana 2/2 that gives other vampire creatures you control +1/+1, 2-mana Vampire Lord. It's not legendary, so you can stack them up. And Vampires is a tribe that can really use a Lord for going wide. It works so well with Maverin Fiend. It works so well with Legion's Landing, with Bishop of the Bloodstate to drain the opponent out. So I think this is a card that pushes token go wide Vampire Tribal into the actual conversation in Standard. Is it better than Energy? I don't know. Probably not. Energy's super good. But I think this makes Black-White Vampire Tribal an actual option. You can actually have a conversation about it being good enough. Speaking of 2-mana lords, we also got Merfolk Mistbinder. Another 2-mana lord, just like our Vampire. Other Merfolks +1/+1 for just 2 mana. And Merfolk can also take advantage of lords really, really well. Kumena Speaker gives a really aggressive 1-drop. If you can play Kumena Speaker on turn 1 into Island plus Merfolk Mistbinder on turn 2, you have a 3/3 attacking Kumena Speaker. That is a really fast clock. Your Merfolk Wild Nacatl. Deep-Root Waters goes really wide with hexproof creatures. We have Kumena herself as another payoff. So I think that the combination of Kumena and Merfolk Mistbinder definitely means Merfolk, just like Vampires, is actually in the conversation to be a real standard deck now. Not to be outdone, the Pirates got a 1-drop of their own in Daring Buccaneer. So, Daring Buccaneer, not a lord obviously, but this might be the missing card for Pirate aggro. A 2/2 for 1, you gotta reveal a Pirate in your hand or pay 2 more, so it needs to be played in a Pirate deck, but this gives Pirates a really scary curve. You can reveal a Stormfleet Aerialist, play your 2/2 on turn 1, into raid out a 2/3 flyer on turn 2, into Ruin Raider, into Hostage Shaker. So I think Daring Buccaneer really increases the odds of Pirates being playable in Standard as well. So it has been a great day for the Ixalan tribes as far as Standard playability. We also got Ravenous Chupacabra, which is basically just a Necrotal. It kills a creature when it enters the battlefield. When you consider that Murder is 3 mana and Ravenous Chupacabra gives you a 2/2 body left behind for just 1 more mana, it's actually a pretty good deal. And it seems amazing with Panharmonicon. The only downside is Panharmonicon, all the good stuff, Gontis and Hostage Shakers are in the 4 mana slot. So Ravenous Chupacabra kind of fighting over that. But I'm definitely excited to try out the Beast Horror in a Panharmonicon deck. It has a removal spell. We also got some more Mythics sneaking in later in the day. So Time Stream Navigator gives us a 1/1 for 2 mana, and it has Ascend. And the Ascend ability is pretty scary. So for 4 mana, you can tap it and put it on the bottom of its owner's library, and you get to take an extra turn. It is the creature version of Time Walk. Yes, you need Ascend. Yes, you got to build around it to really make it work. But a Time Walk effect and a cheap price with a body is definitely worth considering. I think it's especially exciting for Modern, where you can collect a company into it. Of course, the challenge is you need to have enough permanents on the battlefield for Ascend, which might be an issue, but maybe you play Lingering Souls or other cards to put a bunch of permanents on the battlefield. Another thing you can do that someone mentioned that is super, super sweet, although probably not competitive, is if you could get your library empty and have a Lightning Greaves out, you can just keep putting Time Stream Navigator on the bottom of your library. You draw it for your turn, you activate it, take another turn, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. So you can kind of go pseudo infinite with Time Stream Navigator with the help of Lightning Greaves if you can get your library empty. Maybe with something like Glimpse the Unthinkable. We also have some commander potential here. Grenzo Dungeon Warden. Of course, it's off color as far as color identity, so you'd have to play a different commander. But Grenzo lets you put creatures from the bottom of your library into play, which means you could kind of go infinite with Grenzo as well. Just keep activating Grenzo, getting Time Stream Navigator, again, use something to give Time Stream Navigator haste, and you just get to go super infinite. We also got Tillinolly's Summoner, which is an interesting red 2-drop. So it has Ascend. Again, every time it attacks, you can pay red and X. And if you do, you get X 1/1 elemental creature tokens tapped and attacking. Then you have to exile them unless you have the City's Blessing. So if you had 10 permanents and you turn on Ascend, then you get to keep those tokens. So just how good this card is, I'm not really sure. It's kind of reminiscent of like a smaller Hero of Bladehold, a Handweir Garrison. So the upside is this gives you something to do if you flood out in your aggro deck. You just pay like 5 mana, 6 mana, make a bunch of tokens, pretty awesome. Also, all those tokens help you turn on Ascend and get the City's Blessing because they are going to count towards permanents on the battlefield. So I like that aspect of it. The only thing is it's kind of a one-shot effect because most of the time your opponent's just going to be able to block your Tillinolly Summoner. So you got to make really good use of your one-shot effect with it. But I think it's a super interesting card and an interesting way to turn on Ascend. We also got Shrine Altasaur, which is a dinosaur that prevents damage to our other dinosaurs. So for 5 mana, you get a 3/4. Not a super exciting body. It prevents damage to your other dinosaurs, except for one of that damage, which just happens to be enough to trigger all your raid abilities. The problem with Shining Altasaur is, while it protects you from Lightning Strike, protects you from Sweltering Suns, most dinosaurs are so big they're already protected from that stuff. So I think the main advantage here is Shining Altasaur will just let you swing all your dinosaurs into combat, and if your opponent blocks them, what do you care? They're only taking 1 damage, you're triggering your raid abilities. So I think it's more of fighting in combat than it is preventing removal. The downside is, as we've been talking about with other cards, Cast Out, Ixalan's Binding, Vraska's Contempt, those cards are still going to kill your Shrine Altasaur or any of your other dinosaurs because they don't care about damage. They're not damage based. Finally, wrapping things up today, a couple more uncommons. Starving Paladin, interesting. 3/3 for 2. Seems like a pretty good deal. Doesn't untap during your untap step, and then when you gain life, it untaps. There might be some combo out there. If there's a way you can make it so your Starving Paladin taps to gain life, then you can untap it and go infinite that way. I'm not exactly sure what card would make that happen, but it's worth keeping in mind if you can find the right piece. Could be a combo piece. As a beatdown card, not super exciting. Maybe you can play it in a budget, very budget version of Soul Sisters or something. And then Watery Ambush, another way to make Merfolk cards. I think this is more limited only. 4 mana to get 2 1/1s, even with hexproof, not that good. And then 4 mana to make 1 Merfolk unblockable, also just a bit too much mana. So I think it's more limited than constructed. Anyway, those have been our daily Rivals of Ixalan spoilers for today. So what do you think? What else can you do with Induced Amnesia, our exclusive MTG Goldfish spoiler? What about the new Huatli? How good is it? Can it find a home outside of tokens? Is it insane in tokens? What about Elenda? Can you play in vampires, or do we need more aristocrat pieces? The big dinosaurs, the new Merfolk lords, the crazy uncommons. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.